Say, what's so intriguing out there? It must be mighty interesting.
Oh, hello, Walter. I didn't hear you come in. And yes, it certainly is. I'm watching the birds in that tree on the hill over there.
Don't tell me you're one of those bird watchers.
Oh, I'd hardly call myself that. I just happen to be interested, that's all. The point is, I'm almost sure that at least one of those birds is a black-capped chickadee. Here, take a look and tell me what you think.
Me? Well, I would know a black-capped chickadee from a purple-horned cow. Supposing one is there, what's the difference? Anyhow, I must be on my way. See you later.
Goodbye, Walter. You see, what Walter doesn't realize is that there is a considerable difference about the presence or absence of birds. If that really is a black-capped chickadee, it is just about the first time one has been reported so far south. And that means that there is some reason for it to leave the part of the world in which it usually lives. The reason is that something has deprived it of its usual food, and it has had to wander farther afield in order to survive. In other words, something, or perhaps some person, has disturbed the balance of nature, and that can be a serious thing for man as well as for other living creatures. When we think of wildlife, more especially of birds, we think of a scene like this. There seems to be tens of thousands, even millions of birds in the world. There are very few people in city, town, or country who haven't seen a flock of wild geese flying overhead. They fly in unmistakable formation, always that moving V-shape catching our attention. Within the most domesticated of us, the imagination responds to the honking of wild geese. Their steady and unhurried flight seems to call to the nomad nature in the heart of every man. But this romantic attitude is only a half-intelligent approach to the matter. In order to maintain a happy, prosperous country such as this, the balance of nature must be maintained. Now, what is this balance of nature? The farmer knows that conservation is vital to our own prospect of living. People talk glibly about the balance of nature without realizing that while life plays a vital part in keeping in order all the natural machinery of fertility and growth, a lack of balance can start a chain of events which will, in its outcome, prove disastrous to some particular way of life or to some special surroundings. Every sort of creature, including you and me, is adjusted to its special way of life. If that is changed, the resulting disturbance of the balance of nature is fatal. Imagine a continent in which has not been invaded by civilized man. In such a place, the relationship between living things would swing like a pendulum across the point of balance. It does not mean that there would always be exactly the same number of each kind of animal, bird, insect, and fish, but over many years the number of each would be the best for the good of all living things. This is how God in his wisdom planned the balance of nature. In ordinary conditions, the weak would be killed by the strong, those who are, in nature's language, the best fitted to survive. If a species is nearly exterminated by its enemies, those enemies by this very act lose their food supply and will themselves perish. Thus, by nature's laws, the balance is restored. All of this applies to every form of life, even to those forms which we perhaps do not like. It seems natural for people to dislike certain kind of insects. Take spiders, for instance. They make me shudder. And yet, while all are to some degree poisonous, most of them are quite harmless to mankind. What is more, spider lovers say that the spiders have no wish to hurt us at all. They say the spider's looks are against it, and I can agree in that. But they also say that spiders are among Earth's most valuable citizens, doing away with untold number of pesky insects. As for snakes, did you know that out of 135 kinds of North American snakes, only 20 are poisonous? None of them looks too bad, not when you know that in the Karoo Desert in South Africa, some years ago they found a reptile with 7 feet and 3 eyes. Compared with that, we have nothing to complain about. All of them play their vital role in preserving the balance of nature which God so wonderfully planned. But now, you're probably wondering what all this has to do with us. Well, it so happens that wildlife and human life are closely joined in their cause and effect relationship. Have you ever heard the famous statement that the amount of red clover in England depended upon the number of maiden ladies in the rural districts? It was proved, too, and I'll show you how. It began with the discovery that clover was fertilized by bees. If there were no bees, the clover would become rare, might even disappear. Now, the bee's worst enemy is the field mouse, which destroys combs and nests. Then suppose there are a lot of cats. They would kill the mice which worried the bees. Now, this notable scientist said that most cats were owned by unmarried ladies, and therefore, the more spinsters, the more cats, the fewer mice, the fewer mice, the more bees, the more bees, the more clover. Then the scientist went even farther, stating that Britain's greatness was built largely upon good British beef, which in turn depends upon the clover pasture. And so Britain's greatness, the scientist insisted, really depends upon the number of maiden ladies living in her island. Well, this sort of brain exercise could be carried on indefinitely, while each statement would contain an element of truth. A true example of this may be found in the far north of this continent, and this is an example which is not exaggerated at all. The snowy owl feeds in the summer on lemmings, small mouse-like creatures inhabiting the Arctic barrens. They are also the staple food of the Arctic fox. Every 4 years or so, the supply of lemmings fails, and there are not enough to go round. When this happens, the snowy owls fly south to catch mice and rats. Now, here is where a chain of cause and effect influences the practical economy of the country. When the men at the Hudson's Bay Company outpost see this migration of owls to the southward, they know there is a shortage of lemmings. They know also that the Arctic foxes will be scarce, and therefore that it will be a season when they must extend credit to the Eskimos. So you see, man has learned not only that his own life is influenced by this balance of nature, but he has also learned, to some extent, to read the signs. However, he has done more than that. He has attempted to control this balance for himself. Man is an inquiring creature, as you know. He possesses supreme confidence in his own ability to run this world better than it has ever been run before. And it is this determination which we may thank for all the improvements which we enjoy today in our way of life. And so, in many countries, man has tried to improve the status quo. Not all of his efforts to help balance nature's books have been fortunate either. Perhaps the best example of a failure occurred in Jamaica, that lovely island in the West Indies. On that occasion, things got so entirely out of hand that nature herself had to step in and straighten matters out again. It began when rats went ashore from ships calling at Jamaican ports. They liked the climate, and soon the island was infested. Traps and poison failed to remedy the situation. Now in India, the dreaded enemy of the rat is the mongoose. 6 of these animals were released in Jamaica. They set to work to kill rats and to multiply themselves. They cleaned out the rats all right, but by that time there were 10,000 mongoose. With the rats gone, the mongoose turned to chickens, geese, lambs, dogs, kittens. In 10 years they were a greater curse than the rats. Then nature noticed their plight and stepped in herself. She sprinkled the mongoose plentifully with ticks, which reduced the number of the animals and lowered their vitality. Instead of hunting animals and birds, they contented themselves with insects, beetles, and caterpillars. The balance of nature had been restored. It is an old and well-known saying that no man lives to himself alone. But the matter which comes closer to home, to us even than that, what we have said about nature is equally true of ourselves. A lack of balance can start a chain of events which will, in its outcome, prove disastrous. Just as man has felt confident of his ability to disturb the balance of nature and thereby improve it, so he has also felt confident that he can alter the balance between his own physical, mental, and spiritual natures. But, as the Bible so clearly teaches, he has not been able to do so without paying a price. From his efforts, there results for him a state of imbalance which is taking a fearful toll in human misery. For it is this lack of balance which is a basic reason for the presence of so much tragedy and sorrow throughout the world today. A disturbed world condition is but the sum of millions of disturbed lives, lives which are out of balance. Turn to St. Luke's Gospel and read the last verse of chapter 2. And Jesus increased in wisdom. That is mental development. And stature. That is physical growth. And in favor with God. That is spiritual maturity. And in favor with man, which is social adjustment. On the physical side, I think that every one of us is ready to acknowledge the value of good health. But this is not in itself the answer. Mentally, we tend to place our trust in psychology, which is of tremendous value and importance, and yet it, too, is not enough. Our spiritual inclinations lean to the doctrine of the progress of the human race, a continual improvement, a moving upward, which will lead us at last to perfection. Millions still cling to this, although the theory lost much of its glamour in the horror of the concentration camps of recent years. They gave little evidence of mankind's progress toward perfection. Instead, they give the clearest picture of what can happen when the balance of man's nature has been disturbed. Out of Christ can only mean out of balance. Listen to the Apostle Peter. Add to your faith virtue, and to virtue knowledge, and to knowledge temperance, and to temperance patience, and to patience godliness, and to godliness brotherly kindness, and to brotherly kindness charity. For if these things be in you and abound, they make you that ye shall neither be barren nor unfruitful in the knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. Here is truth, but it is truth which we are loath to admit, because to do so means a surrender. To admit that we need God to influence all of life is to give up our personal pride, our supreme self-confidence in our own ability to control the balance of nature within ourselves. Yet there are millions of wonderfully happy people who have finally yielded to the Christ of Calvary. They are the true Christians whom you know and admire. My friend, within your life, God will achieve the same thing. He will restore that peace and stability. He will supply that rest which the heart without him is always lacking. Will you permit God to restore the balance in your life? Won't you respond to the call of Christ, who says, "Come unto me, and I will give you rest"? But now we must conclude our chat, and so to you and to everyone everywhere, the Salvation Army sends its three-word benediction. God bless you. Meet me again soon, won't you, when we shall seek to learn more of him who is in very truth the living Word.
The living